Hello, good evening everybody, and welcome to our Insight into Charity and the Third Sector event this evening. It's lovely to have you all here, and yes, I have just remembered to unmute myself. So I'm really excited to be here this evening and to welcome our guest speakers this evening. So we have with us tonight Rebecca Morgan, and she's Major Gifts Manager at National Theatre, Sophie Fox, who's Director of Business Development at Humankind, and Jessica Stewart, who is CEO of First Step. So the evening's going to work in that each of our speakers will present their slides and their career and their journey to how they got there. And then there'll be a short section to do with some HE and careers suggestions, and then we can take some questions as well. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our first speaker and welcome Rebecca this evening. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca. To be honest, I was a bit surprised when I was invited to be speaking today, because in my mind it kind of feels as though I've only just left Manchester High. But actually I have realised that I now have to accept that that was over a decade ago. So hello. As you have just heard, I work at the National Theatre in London, and I work in their fundraising team. And before that, I worked at the Victoria and Albert Museum, the V&A, for a few years, also in fundraising. And I've held various fundraising roles across the third sector since I graduated from university in 2014. And I'll get on to telling you a bit more about exactly what my job entails and how I got there in a few minutes. But I thought it might be helpful to first just cast my mind back and share with you some of my recollections of my time at Manchester High and how that set me up on my road to this thing called a career that I'm here to tell you about. So my overarching memory of my time at Manchester High is that I was really busy. I started out there as a very meek, very quiet, sensitive 11-year-old with no friends. And over the course of my 7 years there, I really came out of my shell and threw myself into everything that was offered to me in terms of just the huge array of extracurricular activities that were on offer there. I got involved in the school plays. I was really into music, did Model United Nations, ended up being editor of the school newspaper. I don't know whether Onward still exists, and ended up being head girl, which frankly came as a huge surprise, as I just didn't really think that that was ever going to happen, coming from that very quiet 11-year-old that I joined as. And my year 10, 11 and sixth form ended up feeling like an incredibly busy schedule of extracurricular activities, and then also doing those things called GCSEs and A-levels. And I think I always lent more towards the artsy side of things at schools in terms of the subjects that I was choosing. So for my GCSEs, I did English, maths, science, additional science, history, French, RE and drama. And then for my A-levels, I went on to do history, French, philosophy and ethics and classical civilization. And the approach that I took when I was choosing them was basically to just do what I enjoyed and what subjects I felt like I was good at. Because I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do for a job when I was at school. I knew that I loved the arts, I loved performing and singing, but I had the sense that I didn't want that to be my career. And I just didn't really think I was good enough to pursue that as a career, but I had aspirations of being in that world in some capacity. I just didn't really know how to get there. So I landed up applying for history at university. And I think my decision process around choosing history was just that I really enjoyed it. And I kind of figured that if I was going to be spending the next 3 years immersing myself in a subject, then it really needed to be one that I enjoyed. So I applied for universities, and that was simultaneously a really exciting and also quite stressful process. Exciting because it was great to go around the country visiting loads of different cities and imagining future versions of myself and my future lives in all of these different places, but then also quite stressful because I think I put quite a lot of pressure on myself throughout that whole process, and really kind of talked myself into thinking that I had to get into my top choice and I had to get into every single one that I applied for. So I applied to Oxford, Edinburgh, Leeds, Newcastle and Birmingham. And then I didn't get into my top 2 choices. They rudely rejected me, which was Oxford and Edinburgh. And at the time, I remember feeling just really disappointed and sad that I hadn't got into my top choice. But I headed off to the University of Leeds, and honestly, I had the best time ever. I genuinely think I could probably speak for this full 20-minute slot about just how much of a brilliant time I had there and how many amazing things it did for me. But I will stay on brief and get to the bit where I talk about my job very soon. But actually, I had my first taste of a career in the third sector when I was in my third year of uni. So I took a year out in my third year and enrolled on an Erasmus study abroad year in France. So the plan was for me to be in France for a whole year studying history at a French university in French. And I had these really grandiose visions of how amazing this year abroad would be, whilst enjoying this incredibly stylish, relaxed French lifestyle. And unfortunately for me, it didn't quite pan out that way. And I actually had quite a tough time of it for various reasons. And I ended up dropping out. So I came back from France feeling like an absolute failure, coming back to my mum and dad's, and I had 6 months to fill and really wanted it to be constructive in some way. So I ended up speaking to somebody that I knew who worked at the Royal Northern College of Music, which is literally just down the road from Manchester High. And I kind of landed on my feet there because she offered me a chance to do an internship in their fundraising team at the RNCM. So for 6 months, I had a 9-to-5 job, 5 days a week working, and that's where I kind of cut my teeth on fundraising in the third sector. I wasn't doing anything particularly groundbreaking in those 6 months. I was doing a lot of database admin and research and basically any odd job that was thrown my way. But all the while I was just there being a bit of a sponge and soaking up what it meant to be in a fundraising department and what working in the arts was like. And when I first started at the RNCM, my first ever boss sat me down and said, look, you've come here into the fundraising team. I don't expect you to be chained to your desk. Go up and talk to people, get to know people that work here and find out what they do. And she gave me some really useful advice that I have very much carried with me throughout my career. And that is that people find it very difficult to say no to being asked to talk about themselves. So somewhere deep down, being asked to talk about your career and how you got to where you are is actually really flattering. I mean, look at me this evening. I was asked to talk about myself for 20 minutes and was genuinely surprised that you would want to hear what I've got to say, but also quite flattered. So here I am. And I used that approach whilst I was an intern and spoke to anyone that would speak to me that worked at the college, telling me about what they did and what their job entailed at the college. And over the course of that 6 months, I built up a really comprehensive map of the organisation that I was working in and the type of jobs that people could do there. And it made me realise that the arts is a hugely varied sector. You don't have to be a performer or an artist to work in the arts. There were people working in press, managing the college's public affairs, in the marketing team who worked on all of the advertising for the college and their social media. There was an events team who ran all the big college events and graduations. There was a whole programming team of people scheduling our public programme of gigs and concerts, and there were people managing the retail offers, looking after all the restaurants, shops and catering. So it was a hugely varied organisation with some really skilled, really talented people working there behind the scenes. I think something that's quite daunting about considering a job in the arts and more broadly in the third sector is that when you leave university, you've got this degree and you've spent 3 or 4 years immersed in this really academic world, and you kind of realise that you don't actually know what it is that you don't know. You don't know what jobs are out there to be applying to. It's not like being a doctor or a lawyer or a civil servant and taking a very structured journey into a profession. It's really a case of finding out what jobs are out there and applying relentlessly until you get one. And for me, that internship helped me navigate my way through that time because I already had a bit of an insight into what an arts organisation looks like and what kind of jobs were out there. And I had already actually landed on the idea of working in fundraising because that's what I decided I wanted to do. So I left university, graduated, and I went back to the RNCM, and they gave me a permanent job there in their fundraising team, and I've never looked back. I have since moved down to London and work in fundraising in different organisations across the third sector for the last 7 years, which leads me on to actually telling you about what I do. So this talk is called Insights into Jobs in the Third Sector. So maybe it would be helpful to frame this whole evening up top with a really quick definition of what we mean when we talk about this third sector, and then I'll move on to talking about what fundraising in the third sector entails. So we hear about these sectors quite a lot, right? You'll hear about people talking about the private sector and the public sector and the third sector. And in very broad, quite simplistic terms, the third sector refers to any voluntary or not-for-profit organisation. That doesn't mean that the organisation cannot make money and cannot turn a profit, but it means that any funds that are generated by that organisation are put back into the pot to continue funding its activity. So the third sector is really wide-ranging. It covers a lot of different organisations. I have only ever had jobs in the third sector, but during my career so far, I've worked at a university, in a charity to support blind people and their carers, in a professional membership body for architects, in a national museum, and at a theatre. And they're all incredibly different organisations in terms of what they do and who they serve and what they're about, but they're all united by the fact that they are not for profit and have charitable status. So they are charities. Now, as I said, every organisation in the third sector is different and no one charity is the same or has the same structure, but what pretty much all charities need to do is fundraising, i.e. generate their own income, which enables them to exist. And lots of non-profit organisations are really good at finding innovative ways of generating money. So let's take the example of the National Theatre, where I currently work. We make money. We do this by selling tickets to our performances. We tour our productions around the world when COVID is not a thing. We have restaurants, cafes, bars on site that people spend money in. We have a bookshop. We have amazing spaces in the building that we hire out as venues. We're very good at innovating and finding ways to monetize our assets. However, a lot of that activity also incurs a cost, as does putting on 25 productions a year and paying all of our staff. So actually, even though we're really, really good at being very enterprising and finding ways to make money, there is still a shortfall. So what are our options for us if we have this shortfall and need to balance our books? Option one is to reduce our spend, to decrease the size of our organisation and reduce our activity and the amount of work and art that we produce. But we want to be one of the best theatres in the world, so we don't really want to do that. Option two is to generate money from other sources, and that's where the fundraising department comes into play. Our job is to know our organisation inside out and secure funding for our organisational activity to help fill that funding gap. So where do we get that money from? And that is the million-dollar question, and it literally is sometimes a million-dollar question. The department I work in is responsible for securing income broadly from two different sources: corporate organisations and individuals. So let's start with corporate. You know, when you go and you see a play and you open up the programme and you see a load of corporate logos in the programme, that's because a corporate organisation has sponsored a certain aspect of the theatre's work and they are being recognised as sponsors. So my team manage those relationships with our corporate sponsors and identify new opportunities for corporate sponsorship across the NT, whether it's a particular production or digital platform that we're launching or a ticketing scheme to open up access to the theatre for young people. There's a whole host of activity at the National Theatre that is sponsorable. So that's one avenue of income generation. And then I specialise more on the what we call major gifts side, which is all about generating philanthropic gifts from individuals. So in a nutshell, my job is to identify individuals who are very warm to the organisation, maybe because they book loads of tickets or they've been introduced to us by a board member and are interested in who we are and what we do, or they are particularly well known for being very philanthropic. And I open up a conversation with them and I build a relationship with them on behalf of the NT and establish just what it is about the National Theatre that they love. And if I sense that they're kind of particularly committed to one area of our work, then I ask them if they might consider supporting that aspect of their work. And I have massively oversimplified that process, mostly because I don't have a lot of time to go into the ins and outs of how major giving works. But at the very core of it, whether I'm asking someone for £100, £1,000, £100,000 or £1 million, is relationship management. and using my interpersonal skills and emotional intelligence to kind of read a person and navigate the building of a positive and mutually beneficial relationship for both them and the NT. So to give you a flavour of a typical day for me, I'm just going to overlook the whole pandemic thing because honestly, COVID-19 has had a really devastating impact on the arts and particularly theatres in the last year. And the organisation that I work for has really struggled to survive. And we've all been working from home and I've been in my bedroom for the last year. So I'll spare you the details of what that looks like. Well, that pretty much looks like this. And I will paint a slightly brighter and more optimistic picture of what I hope we'll be returning to in terms of a typical day over the next few months. My job is pretty much office based in normal times. I'm based at the National on the South Bank. And I guess my time is kind of split 50-50 between looking after our existing donors, so those donors that I have already managed to convince to support the NT, meeting them for coffee, taking them on a tour of the National, introducing them to some of our creative teams, just making sure that our donors are getting the best experience of the National and really seeing the direct impact of where their support goes. And then the other half of my time is spent identifying and building relationships with new donors. And in reality, this means a lot of meetings and a lot of phone calls with potential supporters, a lot of going for coffees, a lot of attending opening night press views and talking to people, and then a lot of writing of funding proposals and sending very tactful emails and having sometimes quite tricky and complicated phone calls. It's really varied and I feel really lucky to work in an organisation that inspires me and that I love and that I'm able to do that for. So I feel like I've really rambled on about my life and what I do. So in an effort to distill the last 16 minutes into something that you might be able to take away with you, I'm going to leave you with 3 of my reflections that I hope are helpful, whether you leave this talk wanting a job in the third sector or not. So firstly, I think failure is a pretty good thing. And I know it sounds super cliche, so I'm sorry, but just stick with it. When I think back to the times over my academic and professional career when I really thought I was a failure and had messed up, when I didn't get into, the top university that I wanted to and ended up dropping out of French university because it just wasn't right for me, I felt like I had let myself down. But actually, those moments ended up really leading to some of the most exciting opportunities for me. If I hadn't dropped out of that study abroad year, I wouldn't have got that internship and I probably wouldn't be working where I am now. So truly, there is merit in messing up. And that can sometimes be when life goes in the most constructive direction. So don't be scared to fail a little bit. My second reflection is just harking back to that point about asking people about themselves. Don't forget that people will always be flattered if you ask them about their jobs and their careers. And the more people you can speak to and manage to wangle a 30-minute coffee with to learn about their jobs, the better. Build up your network of people's brains to pick. You never know where those conversations might take you and what you might learn about a profession or a potential career. People are very unlikely to say no to you. And if they do, it doesn't really matter. So just go for it and see what happens. And then my final point is something that another old boss shared with me. Again, potentially quite cliche words are about to come your way, so I apologise. But if you are considering a job in the third sector or even elsewhere, the most important thing is that you work somewhere that inspires you. Finding an organisation that does something that makes you go, yes, this is meaningful to me. I can really connect with this mission and I want to be involved in that. It's the best chance you can give yourself for loving what you do. As a fundraiser, my job is to advocate for my organisation. And trust me, if you're asking somebody to give that organisation £1 million, you really need to be able to demonstrate the fact that you believe in it. So whether you want to be a fundraiser or you want to work in a different role in the third sector or even beyond, starting with a place, an organisation, a company that inspires you stands you in the best stead of enjoying what you do and smashing your job. So I think that's everything now. So thank you for listening to me go on, and I hope that was in some way insightful and helpful. And do feel free to take me up on my own advice and use it back on me. So if anybody would like a chat or a phone call or an email at any point, then I'd be very happy to do that. So just let me know. Thanks.
Great, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. I found that really, really interesting, especially as I'm a great lover of the National Theatre, but I don't have £1,000 or £1 million, I'm sorry. But, yeah, it's really interesting to hear about the background work of an organisation like that, because you don't really know what goes on, but you walk into that building and you can see that stuff is going on, and it's really, really interesting. And also the journey that you took to get there, and that bit about not being afraid of failure, and that failure can be opportunity. My sort of phrase for that is every cloud has a silver lining, which is another cliche, but I like to think of it in the same way, that where something perhaps goes wrong or doesn't go the way you wanted to, there is an opportunity there. So thank you, that's really, really interesting. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to type them in the chat and we'll try to answer them. So I'd like to move on to our next speaker and introduce you to Sophie. So over to you, Sophie. Welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me here tonight. My name is Sophie Fox, and I'm Director of Business Development and Innovation at a national social inclusion charity called Humankind. And we deliver support services for people with a wide range of needs, including substance misuse, supported housing, young people and family services, work and skills support, independent living, mental health and social enterprise, a whole range of services. And it isn't necessarily a career that you even know exists when you're growing up, let alone know from birth that you want to get into. So I'll be talking you through my journey of how I got into this sector and what's so wonderful about it, because I do really believe it's just the most wonderful sector to work in. So next slide, please. Thank you. So as you'll see from my colourful work history, I didn't know what I wanted to do for a long time, and I think it might be a theme quite similar to what Rebecca has talked about. So for my GCSEs, A-levels and choosing my university course, I decided to take the subjects that I was good at, that weren't too much of a chore to study and that I enjoyed. So I studied history, music and German for my options at GCSE, and I did music, French and German at A-level, going on to study modern European languages at Durham University. And after deciding that I didn't want to follow in my family's footsteps and become a professional musician, I tried several career paths, all of which I really valued at the time but weren't quite right. I was a student midwife for a year. I worked in recruitment and I worked in human resources. I had a variety of temporary admin and customer service roles in various different organisations. I worked as a policy advisor for a government advisory agency, and I joined the NHS Graduate Management Scheme. Now, it was on the NHS management programme that I got my first taste of the third sector, because they gave me the option of going on what they called a flexi placement, which is like a little mini work placement in another sector. And I went to the Terence Higgins Trust in London, which is the leading HIV and sexual health charity in the country. And as soon as I stepped in the door, I felt a real vibrant buzz of activity. The atmosphere was just so positive, and there was literally no one there who didn't want to be there, and they all shared the same set of values. So I decided that this was the sector for me, and I set about looking for any job really that got me into the charity or not-for-profit sector, which is otherwise known as the third sector. So next slide, please. Thank you. So my first job was as a bid writer for a mental health charity, and my previous varied experience in HR and policy jobs actually proved really useful, because it gave me experience in professional and technical writing and research, as well as national policy. And I instantly felt that this was a job that suited me, because it was almost halfway between where all the action is within services and knowing how delivery works and being quite close to operational managers and knowing how the services are performing, but also being involved within the business side and how the organisation works, how much things cost, what policies are needed to make sure that the service is delivered safely. And as a bid writer, you need to know about all of that to win new contracts. So over time, my career path has developed. I moved organisations to the substance misuse sector, and I became more involved in coordinating bids and leading teams. And I've worked my way up to my current role as director, and I was even given something extra to direct, which was Humankind's Innovation Unit, which was nice of them to give to me. And my current role is directing 2 departments within the charity, the Business Development Unit and the Innovation Unit. Within the Business Development Unit, we're responsible for securing and growing our income as a charity, and this means retaining our existing contracts for services, as well as writing bids and proposals to a new business across the country. And to do this, part of our job is to essentially be complete geeks and continuously learn and keep up to date with the latest research and government policy. And we also conduct a really in-depth analysis of what services are needed in which areas and what the specific needs of those populations are, so we can design the right services for the right people. And we support our operational directors to design services that are really safe, effective, innovative, and we also consult with service users to make sure that we're designing services that they would actually want to access as well. And our unit is also key to developing local partnerships to support our delivery, where a particular contract includes requirements that we might not be best placed to deliver ourselves. And we also lead on securing non-contract funding, which can be one-off grant funds or fundraising donations, major giving. Leading the innovation unit has meant that I've had to develop a whole new set of skills very quickly. And this is an operational unit where I'm managing an online service and a product that we deliver called Drink Coach. And Drink Coach is an online alcohol screening and engagement tool where people can assess their personal drinking levels and risk. And if they're drinking at high risk levels, they're able to access professional coaching online. So within this role, I need to oversee the development of our Drink Coach app and website. And I also need to monitor our service performance and the delivery of our professional coaches. And I'm also a member of the Innovation Subcommittee for Humankind, which works with our Board of Trustees. Next slide, please. So I put together this week in the life as an example of how varied my role is, although it isn't quite varied enough because each week tends to be quite different again from the week before. But this, I would say, is quite a typical week. Each day starts with me checking my emails, because the charity sector, particularly in health and social care, I've found, is changing all the time. So inevitably there will be something unexpected to respond to in the morning. And Monday tends to be my review day, where I meet with my teams to update on our current projects and workload, and review progress and what we have to work on in the coming week. So I have a weekly debrief with both units in the morning. In the afternoon, I would review our overall progress on our strategic objectives in more detail. So we have a number of objectives set out in business plans and strategies for our teams, which help keep us on track. And here, I'm reviewing our innovation unit's marketing and social media strategy to make sure that we're sending out the right messages and raising awareness in the right places for Drink Coach and our other products. Sort of similar to Rebecca's description, I think this is clearly a pre-pandemic week in the life, because at the end of the day, I'm travelling to London. And because we're a national charity, there's a lot of opportunities for us to travel around the country for commissioner events or partnership meetings. And I also manage a fundraising manager who's based in London. So when I'm able to visit, I try to do that as much as I can so that I can support him. Tuesday is the London day, where I might attend a market engagement event held by a commissioner who wants the right provider to deliver their health or social care service. And there are lots of different types of commissioners in the UK. Before working in the third sector, I had no idea what a commissioner was. But the main ones are for public health, social care and welfare services. For kind of local, and they tend to be local councils, but they can also be NHS trusts, national government bodies like the Ministry of Justice, or police and crime commissioners. They're all commissioners that want delivery of services and they want the right provider to deliver their services. So this morning on the Tuesday, it looks like it's Tower Hamlets Council who want to commission a drug and alcohol treatment service, which we'd be interested in providing. And as part of that, we might want to work in partnership to expand on what we're able to offer. So I take the opportunity while I'm in London to meet with one of our established London partners, Build on Belief, who offer a wide range of activities and support for people in recovery. In the afternoon, as I'm the line manager for our fundraising manager based in London, I'd have a supervision meeting with him where we look at his individual targets and objectives to monitor his progress in achieving those and take stock of what he's achieved since the last supervision. And then in the evening, I travel back home. On Wednesday, we often have our senior management team meeting where directors and executive directors discuss our progress against our organisational strategic objectives and any key issues, and these are usually every 2 months. Afterwards, I'll have a meeting with my boss, the executive director, to discuss the budgets of both the units that I manage and resources needed for any upcoming projects. In the afternoon of Wednesday, I'm writing a policy briefing on recent changes in the funding and the procurement landscape to update our senior managers, because they'll need to know and prepare for the additional funding that's coming to local councils, for example. On Thursday morning, I'm attending a webinar to update my knowledge around the associations between alcohol and the hepatitis C virus. And this is one of my absolute favourite parts of the job, is that we need to constantly keep up to date with local and national research and guidance, as well as any policy changes, so that we can make sure that our service design and delivery is underpinned by the latest evidence and best practice, because that's how we stay competitive and that's how we win new business. So within the business development unit, we need to keep our training and knowledge up to date, and we're always learning something new. So after the webinar, I'm reviewing the first draft of a bid that my team have put together to retain our existing children, young people and families service in Haringey. So I'll read through the bid to identify any areas where we can improve our competitiveness or get that extra edge to score higher than our competitors. And in the afternoon, I'm in a service modelling and bid planning meeting for another contract, this time for a supported accommodation service in Kirklees. This meeting would involve working alongside an operations director to design a service that meets the needs of the residents of Kirklees and the commissioners. And that means planning what support interventions we're going to deliver, what they look like, where the service will be based, what staff we'll need and how many service users will be on each staff member's caseload, as well as how much this will all cost and what innovation we can offer to add value to the standard requirements that the commissioners are asking for. And on Friday morning, I have another supervision, this time with the head of our innovation unit, who I manage, but because he lives in an area that isn't very near one of our offices, often our supervisions are done virtually. Later on, I'm meeting with our learning and development department to discuss the launch of training we've developed to support staff who want to deliver consultations online. And in the afternoon, I'll review our organisational response to the Department of Health's independent review of drugs, which has incorporated expertise and comments from across our operational services. And often I will look over anything that we're submitting as an organisation, any written response, to make sure that it is in keeping with our organisation's sort of style. So at the end of the day, I'm meeting with marketing to discuss the organisation's branding and how we can use it effectively. And business development and marketing work a lot in partnership with each other. You'll see that double-sided arrow at the bottom. I'm also on the emergency on-call rota, which means that one of our senior management team has to be on call 24/7 to respond to any emergencies that happen within services outside of office hours, because we do have some supported accommodation projects where service users obviously live there 24/7, so we need to be able to respond to any urgent issues that might happen. So in this particular week in the life, I'm keeping my phone on in case anything happens that needs my support. Next slide, please. So as varied as that week was, I've found that working for a charity has given me the opportunity to be involved in some fantastic projects that fall outside of my role. For example, and I can't believe I forgot to put it on this slide because it was such a big part of my life for months, but I co-led the project team who was responsible for rolling out our rebrand to Humankind in 2018. We used to be called an organisation called DISC. I was also on the committee responsible for developing the organisation's 5-year strategy. I've participated in the COVID-19 response group for our organisation, supporting our staff to navigate the disruption and change caused by the pandemic. I've been part of our consultation group on the development of our website. I've supported the development of new screening tools for our services. I've developed a graduate trainee recruitment process and led the development of Humankind's first fundraising strategy. So I truly believe that all of the experience that I gained prior to being involved in the third sector, so recruitment, working in the NHS, working with policy, having experience in private and public sectors, all of that helped me to develop the skills that were important to support such a wide range of projects in my current charity. And it really helped me to progress my career within the sector. And, you know, even though at the time it felt like I was a bit lost and that all of my friends knew exactly what they wanted to do and I didn't, and it was terrible, actually, through all the other jobs I tried and moved on from, I was actually developing transferable skills that were so critical to how my career has progressed. And even though at the time it felt like, you know, this just hasn't worked out, I made the wrong decision, actually, it was a positive choice to just go in a different direction. And I've been able to use so much of those experiences to the benefit of my current, you know, dream career. So nothing is wasted experience. Everything's important. Next slide, please. So finally, I just wanted to provide a quick summary from my point of view around why you should all consider the third sector for your career. Firstly, I think it's important to say that charities are complex organisations and businesses like any other sector. And I want to debunk the myth that charities are all about charity shops run by your auntie, where you only go every time you need something for a fancy dress costume. I think that the charities behind those shops are often national organisations delivering a really wide variety of critical services to a range of customers and stakeholders. Charities are accountable to a senior executive and a board of trustees. Charities are bound by organisational strategies with clear aims, direction and objectives. And one of the key advantages that I've found of working for a charity is also the opportunity for broader skills development. So they don't have as many resources as many private sector organisations. So instead of investing in multiple teams and units and 100 people to undertake specific projects, charities are more likely to identify interests and skills in individuals and get people involved in a range of different projects, such as the examples I gave on my previous slide. And I think charities also offer a huge variety of opportunities in a lot of different disciplines, including direct service management and frontline delivery, finance, HR, marketing and communications, IT and systems development, public affairs and campaigning, quality and performance. And I think it's worth noting that charities also employ a really wide range of professionals that are often associated more with the public or private sectors, including doctors, nurses, social workers, lawyers, accountants, project managers, HR business partners. We in Humankind, we've got a dedicated clinical department that's run by highly experienced clinical and medical staff. And finally, I think the key thing that made the difference for me was the culture within the third sector, because it's our responsibility to put people first rather than profits or interests of shareholders that you might find in other sectors. And we also highly value lived experience and diversity because of the nature of the work that we do. So you get to meet such a range of people from all sorts of walks of life. We specialise in working in partnership with others, and there's a really strong culture of change and a really strong fight for justice. And it's a kind of working towards a common goal. And everyone has a passion for supporting those who need it most. So it's really special working somewhere where you're all working to shared values and a shared mission to try and make a difference. So if you're interested in working in the third sector and gaining any experience through either volunteering or work experience or fundraising for us, please let Lex know or let me know. And we'd love it if any of you are interested in finding out more about working with us and supporting us in any of our teams. We'd be happy to have a conversation with you. But thank you very much. That's me.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. That's really cool. I've got a strange echo on my speaker. Is that better? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, no, really, really inspiring. And as ever, you know, after I hear these talks, it always sort of gets my mind wondering about what if and, you know, doing that. And that sounds really interesting. And thank you so much for your kind of invitation to possibly getting in touch if people are interested, because I know that this is one of those areas, unlike some of the more immediately vocationally obvious areas, where students do sometimes say, oh, how do I begin to get involved in that? And it's quite difficult to know how to help students find opportunities like this, particularly obviously now during the current coronavirus. So just a couple of things that you said, that, you know, nothing is a waste of experience in working for an organisation that fights for justice with shared values and common goals. I think that's something that speaks to the heart of some people. Probably all the people listening tonight, it's maybe not what everyone wants to do, but I think that's something that people who want to work in this sector really feel, but again, don't know how to put that into reality. So both of the very different roles that we've heard about so far kind of do speak to that, which is really brilliant. So thank you so much. And so I'd now like to introduce our next speaker, Jessica, and who works for an organisation called The First Step. So over to you, Jessica. Thank you very much.
Yeah, good evening. Hi, so I'm Jess. I'll reflect first. I think we've been asked to sort of think about our time at school. So I think, as others have said, for me, it really was the extracurricular activities. Obviously, MH has a really strong academic section, but the things I really valued and I think helped me grow were things like the foreign trips. So I did all the art trips, Italy, Prague and Vienna. Certainly things like music and choir, the swimming, French exchange. I don't know if that's still a thing, but certainly I think probably the thing that helped me grow in confidence the most in my whole school career was that French exchange. I'm still in touch with my exchange student, Audrey. She's a lawyer in New York. So yeah, so just fantastic extra things like that, I think. My subjects really were quite driven again by my personal interests. So I did a lot of science focused subjects. My A-levels were biology, chemistry, maths and history. Again, I'm probably from that generation that it was very much favourite A-level for our degree. So what do you enjoy? Off we go. I had absolutely no career plan. I did biology, another advocate for Leeds University. If anyone's looking for a great university, Leeds is fantastic. Certainly when I was there, you could sort of almost create your own degrees. There was a huge variety of biology modules and you could put together the ones that you were most interested in. So I did a lot of virology, immunology, parasitology, animal development. I knew I could maybe be a teacher, maybe go into laboratory work. I tried both very briefly through the Leeds Careers Scheme. Very quickly discounted them, realised I did not want to sit in a lab doing little tests for the rest of my life, realised I really didn't have that passion for teaching that I think you need. So really, from there, since I've started my career, I've done a lot of postgraduate qualifications. So evenings and during work time, I've done a certificate in business management through Salford University and also a leadership course through the Alliance Manchester Business School. Career path. As I say, I graduated, I had no idea what I wanted to do, certainly didn't know the third sector was a job possibility. I started with a marketing focus, so I was really interested in that. Accidentally sidestepped into recycling and environmental management. And then it happened that I actually met a charity who were doing recycling. That was how they raised funds. And I suddenly thought, aha, I can do something that feels good and I can get paid for it. So after I met that person, I liked the sound of their job so much that I wrote to their HR department at that charity and said, I know you're not recruiting, but can I have the job description for this job that I want? So they very kindly sent it to me. I literally went away and upskilled myself and got all the experience to meet it, and then had job alerts for that charity and just waited for them to advertise this job. It sounds a little bit crazy now. And then when they recruited into that team, I got the interview and was successful with the recruitment. So I think that's probably a tip that when I realised I was interested in CEO jobs much later in my career, I actively downloaded CEO recruitment packs and I filled them in. Probably been doing that for about 6 or 7 years. I was nowhere near the calibre needed, but I would actively look for gaps in my experience and try and fill them with volunteering, or I would go to my boss at the time and say, please, I need some experience in this. So I think, you know, you can really focus your career in that direction if you want to do that. So charities I've worked in, I think this is my 6th charity job now. I worked for Groundwork, the environmental charity, for a number of years. We were delivering climate change and environmental impact work. That was absolutely fantastic. From there, I went to Mustard Tree in Ancoats in Manchester. I don't know if anyone knows Mustard Tree, the homeless charity. So I was their operations manager there for a couple of years. And that was kind of a sidestep for me from going for like landfill diversion and recycling into the charity sector more strongly. Absolutely love that work. I was managing the whole operations of their site, but part of that work obviously was engaging with the clients. As I got to know more and more of the clients' stories, I really realised that homelessness was their problem, but really what was driving that was a lot of mental health, a lot of what we sort of termed inability to form these positive relationships. So no positive relationship with yourself, not really maintaining an employer relationship, family relationships, romantic relationships, friendships. And then I saw a job at Relate, who are a national charity doing therapy and counselling. And I thought, this is my chance to dig deeper into this social issue and really support people with their mental health. So I went to work at Relate for a while, and then I was part of a team that launched a local independent Manchester charity, and that was healthy relationships and domestic abuse. I spent a little time in London, so I've worked at what's called grant makers. So some of the ways that charities fund themselves is to apply for charitable trust and foundation grants. It's quite a specific route of funding, and I was on the other side of the fence at that point, assessing applications and deciding which charities could get the money. That was probably quite important in terms of my current role, because one of my biggest responsibilities is income generation. So I think we've heard that kind of across all the careers tonight, that in the charity sector, how we bring in enough money to sustain ourselves is critical. It's very varied, and I at one point was a head of development, so I was running a different number of income streams and a team there. And really, I think that varied background is what's led me to ending up in the CEO role. I think the fact that I've run operations, I've run fundraising, I've managed teams, it's building that skill set really. The CEO role where I'm at the moment, we are a domestic abuse charity. So our sector is violence against women and girls. We run support services and also a refuge. So that's got women and children starting new lives of safety. It is one of the areas I'm most interested in, and I love that balance between, at the moment I actually work in the refuge in the office Monday to Friday as well as at home, and it really matters to me to be able to meet the women and children, to actually hear about what they've experienced and put those solutions together with their help. So I suppose I just feel very lucky. I think very difficult to give you an average week. I think, as we've heard from other speakers, every day is different, and that's one of the great joys. I think you don't quite know what the day is going to look like when you start. Certainly today I've been in a board meeting with my trustees this morning looking at strategy and policy. I've given somebody a tour of our refuge who's looking at making a big donation. I've spoken to staff, I've updated on where our families are at and what support they need in the future, and I've written a funding bid. So it is incredibly varied, it's incredibly rewarding. Yeah, I think morning catch-ups with the team are probably the best part of my day, because I get to really hear about the work they're doing, and that's what keeps driving me forwards. I think, to say to you all, really, it's for me the best sector. I have worked in the private sector, I've had a couple of jobs, environmental consultancy and things like that. There was never for me the same reason to get out of bed and start work in the morning in those jobs. There was still great reward, financial reward, personal satisfaction, challenge, but not in the same way that the social justice themes and causes do. I think the charity sector probably, if I can sell it to you a little, has something for everyone. I think, as we've heard from other speakers again, every job that you could imagine is available in our sector. So even if you want to be an HR, manager or PR or accountant, you could put those skills to use. But if you just want to get involved because of the cause, if you're passionate about animals, you could go and work for Battersea, or if you really care about health cause, there's loads of health charities. And I think it is about finding that thing that really connects you. It does give you that sense of, I think we've heard again, shared goals and shared vision. I mean, my colleagues are just phenomenal, and I'm really privileged to get to work with them. We all want to move in the same direction, and not just within my organisation, but we're a member of Women's Aid. So there's a Women's Aid National Federation, and all local charities that do what we do can be a member. They do things like policy and, you know, really trying to lobby government for change. So that could be change in laws. We've got a domestic abuse bill going through, looking at how the wording is done in that to make sure we've got the best deal for people. It can be at the moment, for example, they've done a huge joint letter that was signed by a lot of charities asking for a real focus on change in the light of things that have happened recently. I think there's that balance really of feeling you are actually making large scale cultural and societal change, as well as on a day-to-day basis helping people. So yeah, I think the sector needs more phenomenal women. I know that everybody listening to this talk is one of those women because you are Manchester High women. So I'd just say to you, really consider our sector. I think, you know, as again the other speakers have said, talk to us, talk to other people that you know, consider volunteering, consider learning more about different charities, more about different roles within them. And I just think, you know, that level of personal satisfaction is something to really consider. I know from doing careers events at Manchester High before, you might have queries about salary, and I'm sure that will come out in the questions, but I would also reassure you that as with every sector, there's a huge range of salaries. So if financial security is something you're very keen to reassure yourself about, those salaries are available. And I suppose just thank you, and I hope that this is something that's of interest to lots of you.
Fantastic, thank you. That was really lovely. Just another kind of really engaging, different, yet many similarities version of working in that sector. And just the passion really comes through the sense of kind of authenticity and shared values and common goals. And I like that notion of having worked in the private sector doing maybe similar type of work, but then the different feeling that you get working in the charity sector, the third sector. And also, you know, go women and supporting women and saying we need more strong women in this field, in this area. And you're absolutely right. All of the work that goes on in these areas, there is a lot going on at the moment with regards to women and society and things like that. So I think it's really, there's a real immediate connection and sense of connectivity and authenticity to what's going on in all of the work that you do. So there's a lot of food for thought there, actually. It's, you know, I've taken lots of notes and it's made me think about lots of different things. And I don't know if anybody watching has any questions that they want to ask about. You know, we've alluded to salary, and that might be something that, you know, that people are interested in. Because one of the things that I thought about, and I'm going to move into a few points about HE in a moment, but that I was thinking when Sophie was talking about your days, I know they're all really varied, but I sort of thought the move from being maybe kind of frontline with the clients doing that immediate impact work versus going into a sort of strategic management role more behind the scenes, which has amazing impact, but how much it's that balance between having immediate impact and then having strategic impact, and whether there's a balance to be had there, which it was something that struck me. But I'm sure there may be some questions about that at the end. So what I'm going to do now is just say a little bit about HE and universities. So next slide, please. So as we've heard actually from our three speakers, and is also the case for the majority of jobs or careers in society for which 70% do not need a required expected degree subject, going into this sector does not require a particular degree of any kind, a particular subject. Indeed, there may be aspects of this work that don't require a degree at all. Different kinds of training, different kinds of experiences, apprenticeships, training programs and things like that. But because we talk specifically to university courses for the majority of our students, that's kind of what I'm going to focus on a little bit now. So as you can see, the subject that you study really doesn't matter. What you would need to do is study something that you enjoy, that you thrive in, that you feel that you can achieve well in, because what we've heard from all of our speakers is it's what you do when you get to university or course that makes the difference. It's the networking, it's the transferable skills, as you can see on the slide here. It's how you progress through your education to develop a set of skills that are transferable, so that you're flexible, so that you're playing to your strengths, so that you're learning something which, as I think Rebecca said, at the start, you're in this academic bubble of studying what you're studying, and then suddenly you're in the real world and you think, gosh, I'm not quite sure how those two things connect up. So university teaches you an awful lot of transferable skills, and you make networking connections, but you don't have to have a particular subject. Having said that, if you have a really strong feel for ICT and computing, for marketing, for subjects, so communication, working in the communication sector, you might think that you want to study a degree in that area, so marketing and business management, for example, because you want to work in the third sector, but you also want to do something around marketing and management. So it's about thinking about what your strengths are, what your skills are, what you enjoy, and then if you want to go and work in the third sector, you can transfer that into that sector. So you don't need to have a degree in a particular area. Having said that, there will be some degrees available which do focus on specific aspects, which there's one I'm going to show you about in a moment, just one example. Something that is available as well, and this is true for other careers, not just careers in the third sector, is that after university you might want to do a one-year master's course, which is a little bit more guided and a bit more focused on a particular area. So, for example, having done an undergraduate degree in something, you might want to do an MA in maybe social policy or community studies. Manchester University, for example, has a programme in humanitarianism and conflict response. And so some of these are a little bit more targeted to specific charity-based areas that you might want to work in. And they're not purely vocational, but they have an aspect to them which enables you to work in the sector, in the area, get some experience whilst you're doing that master's programme. It's a little bit, it may be like a law conversion course or a teacher training or something like that. Slightly more vocationally geared towards further qualification, further learning, but directed towards an area that you're interested in working in. So that's something that's increasingly coming to the fore, I think. But I think the main point is that the skills that you can see up there, along with having awareness of the sector itself as you develop through your degree programme and doing voluntary work along the way, which I'll come on to in a moment. So, I automatically clicked return to move the slide. Apologies. So if we could have the next slide. When we were looking at courses, Miss Hannon and I were looking at this together, and she pulled up this course as just an example of several examples of courses, but Department of International Development. And this particular course is from Sussex University, and it's actually ranked #1 in the world for this subject. It also has study abroad options to it, so it gives you that global perspective, and you can combine it with a number of different subjects. So, for example, you might want to combine international development with economics or geography, or maybe a language if you study languages. So there are lots of flexibility within that. So international development is a really good degree. Several universities offer it, and this one is ranked #1 in the world. And just to give you an example of grade requirements, so this course asks for A, B as its grades, and there'll be a range of course offers at different universities. So if you're interested in studying something specifically like that at university, when you start looking for your courses and start doing your research, do look at these kinds of courses: international development, and maybe social policy. You can do undergraduate degrees in social policy. So there are lots of different things, but it takes a little bit more research. And when we come to looking at HE, so if you're in junior 6 at the moment, we'll be looking at that very soon. You've already started. If you're perhaps in lower years, as you move towards making these kinds of decisions, you can have conversations with your careers teachers about it. So could you have the next slide, please? So what are the sorts of things that you can do now, whether you're year 10 or 11 or in the 6th form? Well, certainly, as we've heard tonight, getting involved, networking, doing some voluntary work. The first link on there takes you to the kinds of voluntary work that you might be able to do whilst we're in coronavirus, because obviously at the moment it's very difficult to do any physical voluntary work in places. But a lot of organisations have moved online some of their voluntary experiences because they know that young people want to access that, they want to get volunteers involved. So you can also be, for yourself, developing your own strengths and skills and interests. So for instance, Rebecca mentioned our school magazine, which is still going on. We have, mentoring in school, prefecting in school. We do ask our students to do voluntary work outside of school. So many of you may well be doing voluntary work already. If, as was mentioned earlier by, I think Sophie might have mentioned your auntie running a charity shop, you may want to do some voluntary work in a charity shop, and then you can make links with that organisation. So there are lots and lots of ways that you can start dipping your toe in the water in terms of voluntary work. You can also become more interested and research and become more informed into this sector. So I think one of the things, and why it's really pleasing to have this topic tonight, is it can be very hard. It's such a diverse sector. We all know what maybe charities are. We might know, we've heard of fundraising, but understanding how all that works together and the sheer volume and diversity is enormous. So start doing a little bit of research by even just listening back to what our speakers have said tonight and Googling even if their organisations, the National Theatre, Women's Aid, First Steps as part of that, Humankind. There's such a range already. So just be Googling them and just see exactly what it is that they do. You can do some raising of money for a charity, and you can also begin to think, as I said, about doing some voluntary work. At the bottom, there's a bullet point there, which is quite a long and chunky website, but it links you to a whole range of it's a sort of umbrella website that takes you to careers options if you want to work in this sector. A whole range of different kinds of opportunities are out there and different organisations and what they do. There are subsections within this website that give you really clear kind of information about roles, qualifications, salaries, skills, all of that kind of thing. And also for those of you who are part of our school, or you may have this at your school, the Unifrog website has an awful lot of information about the different sectors. The UCAS site itself is beginning to get more information about careers, so there'll be a section on there about charity work. The other thing is that university websites, so for example, Manchester University website has a section on the third sector or the charity sector, and you can click on that within its careers section, and it will give you ideas about things that you can do, and again further websites to do research. So it's really about doing research and getting involved on a very on the ground grassroots level initially, with doing some kind of work in this area, as well as talking to people that already work in it. So that's what you can be doing now. And so could I just have the next and final slide, please, for this? So it's a couple of examples, and actually Mustard Tree is up there. We've heard mention of that from, I think Jessica talked about Mustard Tree. So these are a couple of organisations based in Manchester that do have opportunities for charity voluntary work. So you can start by looking at those. So as you know, Mustard Tree is a charity for homeless people, and 42nd Street is a mental health support charity for young people. And you may well be doing voluntary work yourself, but many organisations, local organisations, are always looking for young people, or people, sorry, not just young people, people to volunteer for them. So during coronavirus pandemic, it was just being helping people who don't have any connections, either with bringing things to their houses or even just telephone calls. So I've said to quite a few students that have come to me, if you Google the local voluntary, just put into your local area volunteer opportunities for coronavirus, and things like making telephone calls to people who are on their own, just as a regular point of contact. So there are lots of things that you can do that just start the ball rolling. You sort of have to start somewhere. And very quickly it will snowball to becoming something more significant, and you'll gain confidence in the area. So the two things really are, you don't have to have a specific subject at university. You have to do what you're good at and what you enjoy, but network at university, and possibly consider, if you want to, some professional training, or we talked about we've heard mention of graduate programs as well. So that's all I wanted to say about the kind of university HE side of things. So that brings our evening really to a close, and along the way I've been sort of making a couple of points about what all our speakers have said, and I guess what connects everybody together, apart from the fact that they all went to Manchester High and they're all engaging, successful professional people in the areas that they've gone into and all talked very highly about the school, is that the unifying principle seems to me to be that lots of experiences on the way. Every experience is a successful experience, even if it doesn't go the way you want it to go, because you learn something from it. And I am a great believer in that. It's not just a sort of a cliche to make people feel better. I genuinely believe, and it's kind of come across from our speakers as well, that you learn from every experience, and if one door closes, another one opens, and it gives you the opportunity to learn something else and to maybe take a different direction. And that you need to consider, when you are choosing whatever career that you're going to go into ultimately, if it connects and aligns with you and your values, and you will feel if something connects with your values, and you will feel if it doesn't. And if you have a passion for working in the sector where you are working for a unified purpose with like-minded people, albeit they may be very different to you, but like-minded people with shared goals and shared passions and shared vision, and you want to see change happen for the good of society, or for the good of whatever group of people or whatever organisation it is that you're working for to contribute to society, then that's what you need to keep at the heart of what you're doing. And the way to know that is to get experience in it, and be a little bit brave and be a little bit prepared to take a few risks, and obviously to do your research and do look into perhaps the financial side of things, because with many internships or work experience positions, either when you've left school, during university, after university, sometimes they're not paid, or they're very low paid. So you do have to think about that, and you do have to plan out how you're going to manage that. So I think that's all I wanted to say. I'm not sure if we have any questions. Okay, let's have a look. So I have a couple of questions. So somebody's asked about trends. So what key trends do we see happening in the third sector over the next few years, if anyone is entering the sector, to be aware of? And as we've heard, it's a really broad sector, very different sectors. So I guess I'll put that question to each of our speakers in order that they spoke. So key trends happening in the sector over the next few years. So if I can perhaps turn to Rebecca first. And where do you see your sector moving in the next few years?
That is a really interesting question, and one that I wish I had the answer to. I think the last year has been an incredibly difficult year for the third sector. And I guess when I speak about my experience with the third sector, it's pretty much predominantly within the arts. So that's sort of what I'm speaking to here. And I think for arts organisations, the next couple of years are going to be really formative, because a lot of arts organisations have had to close, they've ceased to exist. The artists that sustain those organisations have had to get, jobs elsewhere because there's just been no work. So I think there's going to be a real process of rebuilding and refocusing organisational energy and kind of just picking ourselves back up, which sounds a bit depressing and glum, but I think it also is a real opportunity for organisations to really refocus their strategy and think about where they're going in the next few years, and kind of move forward with optimism, hopefully. So yeah, I guess the jury's still out a little bit on that front, but we are optimistic as to where it will go, I think.
Great, thank you. Yes, it has been difficult, but the sector will bounce back. It will bounce back. I'm desperate to go to the theatre, so as soon as they open, off we go. Sophie, if I could turn to you next, please.
Yeah, so it is really difficult to talk about the key trends across the charity sector in general, because we cover so many different sectors, but certainly for the health and social care sector, I'm sure it's a theme across the whole of the third sector is cuts in funding. We've seen over the last few years just phenomenal cuts in funding that don't really seem to be showing any signs of stopping anytime soon, because of I think the third sector was really hit hard by the recession, you know, the austerity policies through Tory government. I think there's been huge funding cuts which the third sector has had to be quite resilient to and respond to. Certainly for the health and social care sector, we've had to do a lot more with a lot less, and that has meant being able to be innovative with our approaches to service delivery. I also think that because of the certainly public funding that goes to our commissioners, local councils, most of them, local authorities are asking for providers for a lot more, for a lot less. So you might see them asking for what might have been previously 3 separate services. They're asking for one provider to deliver a completely integrated service that offers. One example we've had recently is offering a substance misuse and domestic abuse and housing service for vulnerable people. So I think there has to be a lot of innovation and a lot of working in partnership to deliver services. I think that's all I can think of for the moment. Oh, I did have another one. Yes, it was I think certainly in the short term, there'll be a lot of health and social care charities that have to get used to a new normal following the pandemic. So, for example, for our services, we were very successfully, but, you know, with quite a lot of disruption, had to adapt to delivering a lot of our services remotely, and making sure that some of our service users, often who come from quite deprived backgrounds, had the equipment and the facilities to be able to access services remotely. And I think that we've had to deliver services a lot more flexibly to respond to the changes that the pandemic has brought. And I don't think that we can go back to the old normal. I think there's been a lot of it's revealed how we can work, because previously I think a lot of services had a set way of doing things, and the being able to make the changes that the pandemic has brought has made people realise, you know, we don't have to be sitting in an office all the time. There are other ways that we can do things, and I think that one of the key trends that we'll see happening is continuing that kind of inventiveness and that innovation to be able to adapt to change, because I think that's what our service users and our commissioners will be expecting now, because they've seen that we can do it. So I think that is one of the key trends that will happen.
Great, yes, thank you. Yeah, I think both sort of go hand in hand, don't they? Cuts to funding and working in a different way. I think I can see that they can sort of be connected up a little bit, maybe not always for the good, but I can see how that could happen. So finally, Jess, what are your views on this question?
Yeah, I think the same for us, the digitalisation really, that, you know, when COVID first landed, most of what we did was face-to-face. And we've certainly struggled in the area I work in with digital poverty. So that same sense of not only do people not have the equipment, they might not have a smartphone, they might not have a tablet, a laptop, they also do not have the financial ability to be constantly with a Wi-Fi package or a data package. So it's not enough that we could quickly flip our services and say, OK, the support programme is via Teams, the coffee morning is on Zoom. We were getting maybe 15 to 20 people engaging, now we get 6 to 7, and we know that digital poverty is a huge factor. I think that's really where the skills of the staff have had to change quite rapidly as well, because not only do we need to use Teams, but we need to then be able to upskill a service user who might be on the phone to us saying, how do I download Teams? I can't get it to work. Those things are very challenging. I think in terms of safeguarding, which is quite specific to what we do, that digital element's also much tougher. Do we allow young people and children to have cameras on when they're on calls? Some of our funders have quite firm ideas about that, and we've really had to be quite agile in terms of our thinking and our understanding. I think for us, again, we're going through a huge amount of legal and political change in terms of our sector. So just the next few years are going to be adapting to that, understanding what the new requirements are. But I think that's in a way, it's one of the best things about the sector, that you are constantly challenged a little bit and stretched to grow and learn new things. So I think it's all positive. I suppose what I do, actually, we've got the opposite problem where there is a lot of money available because it's quite high on the political agenda. So some of the challenges we've had is actually recruiting the right people with the right skills. But, you know, they're all good challenges to have in some ways, really.
Great, thank you. Lovely, yeah, nice sort of range of answers there about the upcoming challenges, which I think are challenges facing a lot of organisations actually. So we do have a question actually regarding salary, and it's just talking about average starting salaries really. I mean, the sector is very broad. There are lots of different entry points into the sector, but I guess as a graduate entering, the question is quite specific about the average starting salary for a fundraiser or fundraising assistant. But I think it'd be quite interesting to hear about, you know, just sort of average salaries, maybe I guess as a starting level as a graduate into the three areas that you work in, if you're able to answer that. So if I can start, if I just go back to the same order again, so Rebecca first.
Yes. I really only have my own experience to draw on this and sort of what I've seen of other kind of starting salaries. I think you will see a big difference between fundraising jobs, particularly that are based in London, and those that are not based in London. That is because London is a very expensive place to live, and there's this thing called London waiting, which means that generally salaries that are based in London for organisations that are there are slightly higher. So my kind of first proper fundraising job, I was a development assistant at the Royal Institute of British Architects. That was based in London, and that salary I think was 21,000. And I think really within the sector you're looking at something between 18 and 22, 23 as a starting salary, which isn't tons, but it's certainly enough. I think particularly with fundraising, it is a kind of area where you move up quite quickly, and it is expected that you will. You get a fundraising assistant job. The organisation you work for don't expect you to be there forever. They know that a fundraising assistant will move on to a fundraising executive or a fundraising manager within 18 months, 2 years. So yeah, it's perfectly manageable. I did it in London, and it only gets better.
Thank you. Thanks for that. So, Sophie, in your experience, what would you say to that question?
Yeah, I would certainly echo. I think that's that was around where my experiences lie, around the 18.5 to 21, 22 mark for a non-London based entry-level role for a fundraising assistant. And I think actually that is if you discount some of the more flashy graduate schemes that offer 40 grand in a company car for when you first go in, I think that might be Aldi if anyone's interested. I think that is quite on the market average for an entry-level position. But as Rebecca said, my experience of the third sector is that if you are really motivated and you go in with a huge amount of commitment, you get recognised very quickly within the charity sector, and people will invest in you as a person rather than hiring 10 roles within a team and there not being very much scope for progression, there is a lot more scope for progression in my experience within the charity and the third sector. And to be honest, I think it's a lot more interesting. But yeah, I think it is on a par to a lot of graduate level positions.
Great, thank you, Sophie. So Jess, how about you?
Yeah, so I didn't go into the sector as a graduate, and I suspect it's too many years for me to make any kind of comparison anyway. We don't require a degree for our entry-level jobs, what I would describe as our entry-level jobs. It's fine if people have one, but we're more interested, certainly we're a values-based recruiter, so it's values and behaviour and passion that we ask at interview and we test at interview. Certainly what I would call my entry-level roles are around 19,000, and we take a variety of different people. And you, as I say, you could just come with a great attitude and we would put you in that role and really upskill you. There's professional qualifications that you do for the work that we do. Certainly, I mean, top end, which I know wasn't quite the question, but I suppose I want to give people reassurance that Women's Aid, who are a national organisation that we belong to, their CEO salary was recruited this year at 95,000 to start. Certainly Refuge, who are the national refuge provider, their CEO was recruited recently on 125. So if financial stability is something that really concerns you, don't also take this I think I get a lot of people saying to me, oh, there's no money in charity work. It's not true. If you want to have that national reach, and if you've got that drive to have that level of impact, those salaries are available. They'll be incredibly complex, responsible jobs, but hugely rewarding, I imagine. So just to say that there is a huge scale. Certainly, a smaller charity will not be paying those wages, but don't let the thought that you'll not ever earn top dollar money put you off a career in our sector.
Great, thank you for that. Good advice from everyone, and thank you for those responses. So finally, we have a question that is to do with kind of going a little bit back to university or your training. So how do you think that skills and knowledge you actually gained at university influence your job roles? And I know that some of you talked about perhaps the internships or your initial entry level roles and voluntary work that you did. But I guess thinking back to university, and what did you learn on your degree programme, if anything, that you think directly helped you with your career? So again, if I can start with Rebecca, please.
Another excellent question. I think it's hard to distill down just how many amazing skills and how much I learned from uni into a couple of minutes. It was 4 years where I kind of worked out who I was as a person, which was incredibly helpful. But I guess just thinking about what did I get from my history degree that I draw on now. Okay, so a history degree involves you reading a huge amount of information, books, articles, journals, all the time. You're constantly taking in information and you are using your skills of critical analysis to draw out the key points of that argument and put them into an argument that you are creating and then presenting in an essay format. That skill in itself is something that I draw on every single day, whether I'm writing a funding proposal and having to put together a really persuasive argument, or whether I am putting together a kind of really tricky email that I'm sending to someone where I'm having to sort of negotiate with them about X, Y, or Z. So I guess that kind of critical analysis skill is something that I really got from my degree. And also, learning at university is really different. You're not being taught anything. You're learning how to interpret information and put it back into an argument, basically, for history. And I learned a lot of skills of how to sit in a room in a round table with 20 other people and all discuss the same thing and have the confidence to have a voice in that room and say, this is my opinion and I think this because of X, Y, Z, and I'm drawing on this argument that this historian has presented. Just building up those skills in my confidence to sit in a room and say what I think and have that grounded in information that I have read is something that I think has really stood me in really good stead for being in a board meeting where you're surrounded by very intimidating people. There are so many skills. I think also kind of beyond the academic side of things, I had a job throughout the whole time that I was at university. I worked in a nightclub. I ran a bar in a nightclub. And actually the experience that I gained from that job, which was not glamorous at all, has set me up so well for how you deal with people, how you deal with leading a team, how you deal with leading a team of people who, some of whom are your friends, some of whom are people that you get on really well with, but you know, you still have to tell them to do X, Y, Z, and kind of learning those leadership skills that I have to draw on every day at work. So I think beyond the academic stuff, just the things that you do outside of university also are really, really formative in kind of building those transferable skills. I could go on and on. I can't say any more how much I love my time at Leeds, so I'll leave it there.
Leeds is always a very popular choice for students at our school. It does have a reputation as being an excellent university. So, Sophie, how about you?
Very similar, actually. I think certainly in terms of communication skills, one of the things that you can draw on a lot from at university is the ability to sort of distill and make concise a great deal of information into, you know, a 500-word argument, or a lot of our bids and proposals, you're given a specific word. You basically have to write mini essays for every response, and you have to be able to really pin down the key points of your argument that you're trying to make, i.e. we're the best, and get the evidence from the information, the huge amounts of information, policies, evidence that there are out there, and what underpin your model, and put that across. I think also in terms of things that I learned at university, a lot of it is around interpersonal skills and being able to get on with a lot of different people, but also work together productively with a group of people that you may not necessarily, you may have, you know, different views to, or you might have a personality clash with. You know, we at Durham University, in our languages degree, we had a lot of small groups where we had to do specific projects or seminars, and there was always somebody hogging the PowerPoint, or there's always somebody who wanted to shout louder than everyone else, usually me. But you know, you learn how to manage and get on with and negotiate with a huge number of different people, and that is just so valuable when you get into an organisation where, yes, you're all working towards shared goals and a shared vision, but you all, within that, you all have different roles and different agendas. And within business development, when especially in an organisation like Humankind, where there are lots of different units delivering different services, we were quite a small business development team, and we get asked to, you know, support and put our resource into so many different opportunities. We have to prioritise, and being able to rationally argue and negotiate with people, and get on with people as well. I think those skills were definitely built up at university, where I was figuring out who I was and what I thought. So yeah, really critical time for me, I think.
Yeah, great. All of that, and all of that's true for so many careers that you would go into, and that's one of the values of a university degree, whatever the subject is, really. Jess, do you have any final thoughts on in response to this question?
Yeah, I think the same, that my degree content was so different to any of the work I've ever done. So it has to be those transferable skills, doesn't it? It has to, as you say, in my case, reading a lot of science papers and turning them into something that you can actually sift through quite quickly. Similar in that I write a lot of fundraising bids. You know, you have to be so conscious of every word that you choose mattering. And I think that is a skill that you do develop through that academic part of your degree. There was quite a lot of practical elements in my degree, so a lot of laboratory work, a lot of field trips. I think that probably really helped me balance what I do. So I am very keen on operations as well as desk-based work. But I think it's just that confidence, isn't it? As you said, any degree gives you that chance to meet new people, move to a new city in some cases, and really stretch and grow. And that, I think, is what really starts you in good stead for a professional career.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, thank you for those answers. I think you've given a really good range of really informative and helpful answers to those questions. But also thank you for your time tonight in delivering your experiences and the fantastic work that you do. And there's such a wide range out there, and you've given us 3 really good examples and also different routes to getting there and different things that you get out of what you do and different sort of agencies and organisations that you work with and that you impact. So it's given us a real breadth of information and experience, and I think a lot of food for thought for our students and people listening tonight. So I'd like to thank Rebecca and Sophie and Jess for coming tonight and talking to us about their experiences and their careers tonight, and showing us the future of what, you know, the people listening tonight can be. So thank you so much. It's been lovely to have you here speaking. It's been lovely to have our audience. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will now say good night to everybody and a safe journey from your sofa to the kitchen. Brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody. It's lovely to see you. Good night.